burning me.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10:30. Shall we begin? Approval of the minutes. Any changes recommended, or can we approve them as is?
Good to me.
Approve as is.
Minutes are approved. Any of the three items from the consent section to be pulled that you'd like to question, get more information on? Everything clear in the agenda package? Okay. Moving on to item 3, someone must be taking the place of Marshall Brown. Okay, Alex.
Hi, bien.
I'm sorry, we had a little spill that we were cleaning up, so I got a little distracted.
Is that why the fire truck was here?
Fortunately,
It's the home stake and the joint water authority.
yes, so,
Guess I know.
we are looking to, so with Sarah Young's detail to taking over the Wild Horse project, where sort of some of her previous duties are being assigned to other people. And one of those, as you will recall, is the Homestake Steering Committee and the Joint Water Authority Steering Committee. I was going to look towards, I guess this is looking towards Commissioners, Councilmember Hancock, right? And so we're going to put Swerveen on those two committees, or we would recommend putting Swerveen on those two committees in her place. And that's what both of those are.
Is that a punishment for him?
I'm really excited for it.
He seems qualified.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Over his thing.
Yes.
He even tutors a couple of different, he volunteers his time as a tutor
Oh,
Oh, does he
to an
really?
engineering group and another.
Cool.
another
And high school students.
High school students, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's delightful. And just for your edification, we generally have, there's 3 members from Colorado Springs and 3 members from Aurora Water. And generally we have operations, P&E, and water resources as one of those members. That's why Swerveen was chosen as the P&E.
Not just
person.
engineers. It's all
Not just engineers.
can't have.
great.
any of them.
So would you consider moving that to council for appointment?
I believe so, yes. Yes.
Great, good.
So agreed. Item 4, you continuing, Alex?
I am going to put the ASO over to, you're going to do the ASO, Rich, right?
Sorry, 4 was the joint water authority. He's being appointed to both.
Oh, I'm,
Oh,
right.
okay,
Oh, yes,
that's easy.
we're on
Yeah.
That's
5.
very easy then. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. And then number 5, ASO. Okay.
Number 5 ASO.
You want me to run it?
Yes, if you could.
Let me pull it up here.
You did a great job in the mountains. We were talking to you, nice job on your presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, I enjoy being in the mountains and presenting. So, so anytime you want to go up there, we'll take you.
Great.
Okay, there we go.
Now we swivel.
Oh, wait, I was wrong.
Now we swivel.
Oh, no, we well, maybe I got him here.
oh,
I can maybe scratch, 'cause I don't like the
do
other
you
way.
want to switch
Is
seats?
this happening in boardrooms all over America?
I can switch screens.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
So this is a presentation for both items 5 and 6 combined together. Casey. This is the airborne snow observatory agreements with the Colorado River District and Denver Water. So what is ASO? Well, ASO is airborne snow observatories. Basically, we're using aircraft to monitor the snowpack in the wintertime in certain basins. And what that consists of is doing a base flight over the basin before the snow is down to get the base condition. So they use LiDAR to basically create the topographic contour of the ground. Then they come back later in the winter. Typically, we try to target when we think the snow water equivalent would be at its max, usually around April timeframe. And they fly again using the LiDAR and they see where the snow surface is. They're also taking, there we go. Now we're on this side.
Good work.
So we're also taking spectrometer measurements, looking at kind of the quality of the snow or the reflectivity. If the snow's got any dust on it, it's going to change how it comes off. So those are the two components. So we're trying to kind of get the depth of the snow. We kind of look at, all right, where's the snowpack during the snow flight, compare that to the base to get a depth. Then they run that in the models and they compare that to other information that's out there from the SNOTEL sites, which are the satellite sites that are collecting snow data, as well as any other manual observations that are going on. And so we couple all that information together, run it through the system, and we try to develop what or predict what the runoff is going to be. Okay, go ahead and next slide. So why do we do it? Again, just to expand our knowledge of the snowpack. It is a snapshot in time. So we fly on one day, and that is the snowpack for that day. So that's again why we try to target those April flights to see if we can kind of capture when that peak might be. There's a lot of data gaps. So the SNOTEL sites are at a certain elevation. They may be at 8,000 feet. They may be at 6,000 feet, depending on the basin. And so you're only getting information in that band. With the flights, you can fly an entire basin and you can capture the depth of the snow for the entire basin, as well as start to calculate the density. So we're expanding our knowledge of the snowpack from different parts in the basin, different elevations. Question?
So
please.
different than the SNOTEL.
That's different than the SNOTEL.
Okay,
Yes, the
okay.
SNOTEL site is a ground-based infrastructure that is looking at the snowpack at a certain
And it's
point.
limited.
One point, it's
Okay.
very limited. Yes, it's for whatever basin, there's, maybe at 10,000 feet and maybe a certain location within the basin. So you're only getting weather data from that point. Whereas with ASO, you can capture the snowpack in the entire basin.
Thank
Yep,
you.
above and below the SNOTEL site.
Question, what you said LiDAR, LiDAR, what?
LiDAR, yes. LiDAR stands for light, distance, and ranging. So it's similar to what our police department uses to catch your speed as well.
Oh, I see.
It can be used for that as well. It's basically a light beam that's going up and down, and it's calculating the distance between the aircraft and the ground and the reflectivity of that beam coming back, and they calibrate that in with the known elevation, and then they can calculate the elevation
Previous
itself.
measurement.
Yep.
And what kind of aircraft do you use?
There was I think we might have a picture of it, maybe. It is, it's not a Cessna, it is some other sort of jet prop
Okay.
type aircraft, yeah.
Okay.
You're
I
flying
think
it?
if you go, whoever's controlling, go back one.
Yeah,
Isn't that the?
Yeah,
like,
that's-
the,
yeah, that's the aircraft right there.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's a jet prop. The reason why we're looking at it is to basically have another tool in our toolbox.
Okay.
When we're looking at water supply, and we're basically trying to be more accurate in terms of our predictions if we can have data from other parts of the basin. Okay, next slide. So a little bit more about the program itself. We are in support of the development of a statewide ASO program. CWCB is heavily involved. There's a lot of other stakeholders listed here that are also interested in ASO. There's a kind of a grassroots push to develop a program for the state. Likely, if it ever gets developed fully, it might go under the CWCB. California has a program. Anyways, it's something that we support of, a larger effort in the future. The map here shows this was last year, just the flights that had taken place or were planned. So the blue were funded, and you can see where we had snow-free collections as well, and what else was planned. So our basins there, of course, are going to be the Upper Arkansas, Upper Roaring Fork, Lower Roaring Fork basins, as well as the Frying Pan River Basin would also be something we'd be interested in as well, Eagle River. So those are our basins. So last year there was some coverage in terms of the program. Just to show the basins that were done last year.
So the Snowtel, is it, how many of those were typically, I can't remember the number from that we have.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure the number of Snowtel sites. I do know that we do monitor a number of those within our basins. That's in the snow report. I think we can send you a copy of that from last year, but we do also monitor those as well.
I just remember, when there was all the confusion with the public because of the media reports, because they were like, oh, there's so much snowpack or
Right.
whatever. And then Greg Baker was trying to explain, well, we measured
Exactly.
with the Snowtel and
Exactly, yeah, and that's, yep.
different basin.
That's right. It's a different basin and very limited spatially, right?
Yeah.
And it's one point in a huge, huge basin, which is a benefit of ASO as we can get more coverage
Yeah.
within the basin. Okay. So we have two agreements that we are proposing. The first is with the Colorado River District. This would be a 3-year agreement. We would contribute $99,000 annually, and basically to support both base flights and on snow flights in the upper Roaring Fork and Eagle River Basin. So the River District has a contract with ASO. They're a private company that is providing the service, and we would basically just be supporting that effort through the River District's contract. The reason why we're doing that is that there are grant funding opportunities, both with Bureau of Reclamation and CWCB, that Colorado District is going after, and they can take our funds and possibly leverage them as matching for the grants. So again, you hear me say when I come here, I like to try to make our dollar become two. That's the way we do that, is if they can get grants, then we can basically commit our funding for match potentially. So we do get the data as well. The data actually gets turned around fairly quickly. In the course of a week, the snow information is back and run through the model, and they're predicting runoff at certain locations. So the turnaround time is actually very, very quick for the amount of data.
Yes.
It's a little bit confusing on the 99 annual, but then not to exceed. So what would make up that difference?
Yeah, so that 99 annual is the 3-year term, and then we put a 10% contingency in there. Basically,
It's 99
yeah.
per year. Got it.
It's 99 per year.
I know how
but-
to do math.
Yep, there we go. You're always the numbers person, so, but we added some contingency in there in case we had weather or something like that would increase the cost
Thank you.
that we didn't expect. The figure there kind of shows some of the output there. The blue is deeper snow. That happens to be the crystal drainage above Aspen. So you can kind of see the information that comes off of there. It's also interesting, they look at avalanches with this information as well. They can see where the snow is moved after an avalanche, which is also pretty interesting.
Excuse me, how many flights will there be?
So we're going to target probably 2 flights per basin.
Per season?
Per season, yeah. So an initial flight and then that flight in April,
Okay.
trying to target
Gotcha.
that peak snow equivalent, yeah.
So, when is the first flight again? I'm sorry?
So the first flight will usually be in January, February timeframe. And then the next flight is going to be later on in the season. And they're looking to see how snow has changed potentially. Also, that the spectrometer collection, the dust on the snow, looking to see if we've had any events, if there's been a dust storms, anything that's impacted the snow. You get that in the layers. So that's also what they're trying to capture. Is there anything at depth on that particular day? Last year we did a flight after a dust event, so we capture that and see what its extent was, because that has an effect on how the snow melts.
Gotcha.
The layer of dust.
The layer of dust, yeah, it makes the snow darker, which absorbs more solar radiation, and so it melts faster. So yeah,
It's a big deal.
it's a big deal.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so if you think about go outside in your black shirt, you get a little bit warmer than you would in a white shirt. because you're absorbing those, that UV light. Yep.
And just what's interesting about these dust on snow events is they can be so massive
Yes.
and so much dust that it can have significant impacts on runoff and how much water is evapotranspirated because of the heat. So
Yeah.
they started kind of realizing this probably about 15 years ago. Like the dust comes up from like the four corners. It comes from so it's really a fascinating phenomenon.
Yeah. Pretty
You know, something volcanic happening somewhere.
It's, well, also, wildfires, the ash deposit from wildfires also would contribute to that.
Gotcha.
Okay. Next slide, Casey. So this is the Denver Water Agreement. So the first one was the Colorado River Agreement. This is the Denver Water Agreement. Again, a 3-year term, a little bit less in terms of contributions, 49.5 a year, including the contingency. This is for the Upper South Platte Basin. Denver Water has a very extensive program in terms of ASO. They do a lot of these flights in all of their basins. And the good part about working with Denver Water is the South Platte flight and their Upper Blue River flight occur at the same flight. So they can go and capture the Blue River and the Upper South Platte because those basins are back to back.
Oh.
So they can fly over the divide. That was the path that they took there last year. So here's bottom left, that reservoir there, that's Turquoise Lake. The long skinny one on the left is Homestake Reservoir. And the larger reservoir out there on the north side, that's Dillon. So you can kind of see the flight pattern there that they took last year. And they can cover both basins.
But
in the
that's
same flight.
Arkansas and Colorado. Where's South Platte?
South Platte's on that eastern side, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so they're doing the upper arc and
They're catching a little bit of the Arkansas basin, but they're also catching the South Platte on that eastern side, as well as the Blue River Basin above Dillon. Yeah, so you can see the extent that you can see from the air. Okay. So similarly, leveraging the funds if there's grant available as well. Next slide. So that's our question for the committee is, do you support the resolution to move these IGAs forward to study session?
Yes, cool.
Further questions?
No, it
concerns?
sounds like a great investment.
Tech, yeah. Councilmember Hancock,
Oh, yeah.
she's,
I'm good. Thank you.
that moves forward. That's
Thank you.
fascinating. Thanks for the information.
You bet.
And that takes care of number 6 as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Great. Number 7, Stewardship West South Platte Forest Treatments.
So that one's going to be me. I do not have a PowerPoint because this is one we have approved in the past before. So I'm just going to talk about it really briefly for you. So up for approval today is the funding agreement with our nonprofit Watershed Health and Forest Health partner, Stewardship West. They're a nonprofit we've been partnering with for a few years now. They're a great partner for us because they have what's known as a master stewardship agreement with the U.S. Forest Service to do work on Forest Service land. So this allows them to fundraise, plan, and manage projects on Forest Service land. It's a really great solution for us because it's a turnkey solution to accomplish our watershed health goals. So we can provide them funding for projects that they're working on in our priority watersheds. And these projects are forest health, forest thinning, reducing the fuel load for wildfire risk. That's the kind of thing they're working on. Their tagline is engineering healthy forests. So previously they worked on the Miller Gulch project in the Upper South Platte watershed. They wrapped that one up last year. And that was a hugely successful project. They treated 1,500 acres over the course of a couple of years. And now they've moved on to some other projects also in the Upper South Platte watershed. The big one they're working on right now is in the Terriel Creek watershed. It's right near where the Hayman fire started, actually, kind of demonstrating the value for the fire prevention, as well as a smaller project. It's like an 80-acre project in the Rock Creek area, which is just south of Bailey, and that's also on Forest Service land. And we are hopefully going to continue finding more projects in our priority areas that they can work on. So they've really been a great partner, and they truly make it easy for us, kind of that turnkey aspect. So asking for 150,000 of funding this year to Stewardship West for forest health and fire prevention work. And I believe this is going straight to council, not to study session.
Correct.
Any questions, concerns? So that can move forward. When are you heading up there again?
Hopefully soon. They work, the cool thing about these projects is they're just below the elevation where there's snow. So they work on these projects in the winter time. So a lot of the forestry crews are busy all summer on other projects, and then they can utilize those forest crews in the winter in their downtime. So hopefully that'll be a good one to go out in the winter, bring mountain bikes, go tour around. So
Cool. Well, let me know when you're going up there. Maybe I'll try to keep up with you.
happy to anytime.
Cool. All right, number 8, Sam, for Highline Canal Stormwater Transition and Management Plan. Highline Canal.
Here, make sure that I can make a full screen. All right, good morning, everybody. I have one IGA with Mile High Flood District to talk to you about, which is about the Highline Canal. We gotta change slides. Ooh, exciting. Okay. So this is for an effort that we're calling the Highline Canal Stormwater Transition and Management Plan, or the STAMP. We love acronyms. And this plan is a collaborative effort for all 71 miles of the canal, starting right around Chatfield Reservoir and ending in Aurora. And within Aurora specifically, we've got 14.5 miles of that 71 miles.
Including the new bridge over I-70?
Including the new bridge over I-70.
Okay, good.
That trail is looking really nice.
Yeah.
This particular effort is looking at the canal itself, the canal bed. And in 2018, we helped with a plan to talk through how the canal is actually being used now that it's no longer a water delivery service within Aurora. And now, a few years on, as we've seen how it's behaved, this effort will be focusing more granularly on maintenance needs, capital projects. We want to make sure that this is a resilient canal as it takes on a new life after its water delivery function. It also has the scope to offer services to all other municipalities along those 71 miles to refine the model in that area. Similar to the snowpack effort, we'll also be using LiDAR. We'll be getting better cross-section understanding of what the canal looks like. But Aurora already completed that in 2020. We actually helped to make the scope for the rest of the communities. They were jealous of our data and they wanted the same. So we will not be participating in the second half of this plan since we already did. We'll just be working on the canal-wide planning effort. Right. So this ask for this IGA is for the baseline $10,000 that all communities are contributing to be a part of the canal-wide planning. Mile High Flood District is bridging a gap between a lot of other communities, so they are helping a little bit more. And then each municipality is paying per mile for their modeling needs in addition to the 10,000 baseline. So we're just asking for our baseline contribution effort.
So this is more of a study. It's
Yes.
evaluating what needs might be in repairs or whatever.
It's keeping in one plan the level of care that we want to provide for the canal constant over the whole 71 miles so that we're collaborating with everyone else and making sure that it's safe to access, maybe not as a ditch rider, but as a stormwater facility and a parks facility.
See. And Denver has has literally given up the property, so to speak. Right?
They have sold it to Arapahoe County, yes. So I believe Arapahoe County owns 45 miles of the canal right now. Douglas County is in talks to maybe sign on. I don't really know about Adams County. We'll see. But yes, Denver Water is no longer the property owner, but they are still helping us understand after they've had hundreds of years of history taking care of it.
Must be a lot of trees that have gone by the wayside. So
That is true.
magnificent cottonwoods that can't get a drink of water anymore.
And that's absolutely something that this plan will be covering, where we target and how we work with those trees to make sure
And do you work with the Highline Canal Conservancy Group?
they are a part of this effort. Yeah.
Tracy, that used to be in Parks and
Oh,
Rec.
yeah.
Yeah, she's be part of, now she's part of that.
Yeah, she's their COO, I think. Yeah, so she's a big participator.
They're very organized and getting things done.
A lot. Absolutely.
Any further questions? I think we're all good with that. That's
Here.
great. Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Number 9, lead service line replacement update, Earl.
So Shawnee's actually going to take the first part because it has a lot to do with the public communication as part of this project. So, and then I'll take the last few slides.
Okay.
Ta-da, here we are. Yeah, so it was important that we come to you today and bring you an update. I mean, we have chugged right along throughout. It's been a few months that we've been at this, so we wanted to be able to get you up to date with where we are. First of all, I'm going to start off with just a really quick recap on the regulations, where how we even got to this place where we have to do this. So we've got the lead and copper rule revisions. Those became effective and March 16th of 2021. And our actual compliance date is today.
Yes.
Today is our compliance day. I'm like, it's today. It's October 16th. It is today. So today is our compliance day. And what that meant is that we had a few things that we were required to get submitted. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we had to get submitted by today. The other part of that is that before the ink was ever even dry on the LCRR, the EPA is like, you know what, we can do better. So that's when they decided they were going to put together the lead and copper rule improvements. And so they started on those, and we were able to get a sneak preview of what that was going to look like in draft last November. And there are in fact improvements that they wanted to make. Yeah, they're like, hey, let's actually make this a little bit more rigorous so that we can be sure that we're protecting public health, which after Flint, and there's been a number of other cities that had a lot of lead, that it was really a national demand that happened. So some of the things that are going to be included in the lead and copper rule improvements is there is a change to the action limit. There had been a 15 parts per billion action limit for lead. That's being reduced to 10. And the other thing that is definitely something that is going to be a little bit more aggressive is that water utilities will have 10 years to get replacements done. So if you've got galvanized requiring replacement or lead service lines, those have to be replaced within a 10-year time frame. And we are going to have to submit a service line replacement plan. And we're going to have increased communication with citizens. So we were sitting here waiting prior to, they told us, they promised us, they said, prior to October 16th, we're going to release and finalize the lead and copper rule improvements. And they actually did it. As of October 8th, they actually finalized.
Just a mess.
And they're like, well, exactly. But you know what? They actually did it. So we know that they've been finalized now. So the compliance date for us is going to be 3 years. So we have 3 years to come into compliance with that. And so that'll be October 8th of 2027 will be our compliance date for the LCRI.
It's an important date. It's my wedding anniversary.
Fantastic. Good to know. We're going to keep that in mind going forward for certain. So that is something that we have. So really that 10-year compliance that we're going to have for getting the lines replaced, that'll give us until 2037 to be able to get those lines replaced. Earl's going to talk to you a little bit more about what that looks like. But now let's get to where we are today, literally today. So what we had to get done today was we had to do an initial inventory of what we have in terms of service lines throughout the city. We talked to you guys about this a few months ago, and Earl's going to talk to you a little bit about what that has looked like for doing that. So the due date was today. I'm happy to say we submitted the initial inventory last Friday. So that went in and life is good. What had to be included in that initial inventory was anything that we identified that was lead, galvanized, or we didn't know. And so there are a handful of unknowns that are still out there, and that's part of our ongoing investigation. The other thing that was required is we had to develop a online map of the inventory so that people could go in and take a look to see exactly what we're saying they've got for their service lines. We also had that become available. In fact, it was in News Aurora recently, and I think that it was made available at the end of September. I don't have the exact date, but it has been available for a few weeks now. So if somebody goes onto auroragov.org/lead, it's one of the very first things you're going to see. You can click on that map. It's an interactive map. Type in an address, and it'll tell you what your service line is on what we know it to be on our side as well as the customer side. And just as a reminder for anybody that is paying attention, we do have divided lines of ownership. So we own up, the Aurora Water owns up to the meter, from the main to the meter,
right.
and from the meter to the house is owned by the citizens or the property owner. So that was due. And this is part of the reason why we really wanted to talk to you today is there is a requirement that within 30 days of today, we have to get letters out to everybody that we have identified as having either a lead service line, a galvanized requiring replacement service line, or an unknown service line. So we have let people know through News Aurora that this is coming, guys. You're going to be getting this letter. But of course, not everybody reads News Aurora. Not everybody gets News Aurora. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware that people are going to be getting letters and they may have questions. The vast majority of what is in that letter is required language that we had to get approved through the state. But there is specific information about Aurora Water and what our lead service line replacement program looks like that's in that letter.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Didn't we do some lead replacement of some line?
Yes, and we're continuing. So
Like this is not,
So, yeah.
we're not.
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
No, we're not
absolutely
starting.
a moving target.
Right.
As I sit here, we're potholing right now and we're
Literally.
doing replacements. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So these letters are not going to go away until we have gotten rid of all of the unknowns, the galvanized and the lead lines. So every single year, we're going to have to send these out. And the other thing is that anytime there's a new property owner, they're also going to be getting a letter. One of the things that we want to do, because especially in this area, 40 to 60% of those properties are not owner occupied. They're owned by somebody that may not even live in the state. And so part of what we're going to do as those accounts change, because a lot of times it's the tenant that's responsible for the water bill. We're going to be starting in the coming months. Maybe you remember this, maybe you never got it. I don't know, is we had a kind of a welcome to Aurora packet. We're going to really narrow that in on having it just be about water because CDPHE, the health department, wanted us to make sure that we were doing more to also communicate with tenants. So they will be getting information about lead lines and they'll also be getting information about how they can look up to see what their service line is made of. But the actual required letter will only be going to the property owners. And we do find out who those new property owners, because we have title companies that call and they switch those accounts over. So that is starting. We know we're going to be sending out about 12,000 letters because in this initial phase, we're going to be sending it to both the property addresses. So annually, tenants will get a letter, but if they're a new tenant, they will just get the welcome to Aurora to let them know. But annually, we will be sending out the letters to both property owners and tenants. Right now, it's looking at like around 12,000 letters, which as of September 30th, that equated to about 9,700 properties that were going to be lumped into that. So that unknown lead or galvanized requiring replacement status.
Still a lot of work to do.
Yes.
And that's where I turn it over to Earl.
So one thing you might want to touch on too is besides English, we're dealing with
Yes.
5
Oh.
primary languages up there.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of effort on that.
There has been, there's 180 different languages spoken in the city, and actually a fair majority of those are in the original Aurora area. So Spanish is the primary second language that is spoken in the city. So we are getting everything translated. We have been we've been very diligent in making sure that what we are providing is also provided in Spanish. And the other part of it is we are going to be getting information translated into the other top 4 languages. So that is going to be made available to people as well.
Okay. So I'm not going to go through the exact numbers on this, but up until middle of September, this is basically where we were at with our program. As it stands currently, we've got a little over 9,500 left to actually pothole to determine what the materials are. We have a contract that was bid out this year, and AGL, our contractor that's doing that work, currently in phase 2 has a little over 3,300 of those, so a little over a third. What also is happening is we coordinate with Public Works on multiple projects. So along with that, we've added in, so we're actually potholing more than that number. We have some of our own water line replacement projects that are up in those areas. So that's inserted into those contracts. And in addition to, with our AMI meter replacements, we've got about 1,400 meter sites up there as a few days ago. And several of those, as we change those over, we're finding galvanized. And then our contractors going out there and potholing certain ones. And galvanized is a difficult material because it's very brittle with its age. So we have been replacing service lines. So that service line number is actually higher because we have broken service lines and our contractor is helping us through that. So that's why it's very difficult to report a number to you because it's always a moving target. And with the multiple other projects and the coordinations, we actually have another probably at least, up to potentially, I'd say 600 or 700 potholing activities going on above and beyond what we have in our phase 2 contract. Yes.
So the percentage, because I remember, when your earlier presentations, you were talking about the homes that were built in the 50s
Yes.
and 60s. And so did it go from lead to galvanized? Or
Typically, that was the
the
material change. And what we've done is we've ruled out properties that are 1961 or newer.
Okay,
So 1960 and older are properties that if we can't identify what services they have, basically those are the ones we pothole.
oh,
And the other thing that's been unique about this program is we realized on the homeowner side, we had to pothole twice. So we do it closer to the meter and then closer to the home because people will partially replace a service line and we're finding multiple areas where they partially replaced a service line. And obviously we have to get rid of the lead and that galvanized in those areas. So it's definitely, as we progress, we improve the project. But there are a lot of unknowns at the beginning and then we put a lot of effort into just
and
keep
then
getting
when
better.
did we get away from the galvanized?
So
I think exteriorly, what we're
70s?
seeing is probably the 60s,
Oh.
but I'm not saying there couldn't be interior galvanized pipe that may be, a little bit newer than that.
And was that just an industry thing or that was a city code?
It was an industry.
Thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think even today, we allow multiple types of materials. So whether it's a PEX, whether it's copper, those are two I'm very familiar with, but there are several others that would.
Yeah.
And to date, the only lead lines we have found have been built in properties built prior to 1954. So really everything after we're finding that will need to be replaced is in that category between 1960 and 1955. Yeah.
So what we're finding right now is about 1% of them are lead. The rest are
Okay.
the galvanized
Okay.
required.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
which is a
Good,
good thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So have we determined a cost per property to pothole?
We do have a cost per property. I don't know that off the top of my head. I apologize. I believe the potholing per property is around, I think it's around $750.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
We got an exceptionally good deal
Yeah,
on our
we did.
potholing because there are some places that are paying that for one pothole.
Oh.
So, and we're getting
Yes.
3. Yeah.
I recall, do we have federal assistance for that?
So we'll be talking about that.
Okay.
That's some of the part that's a little bit frustrating. I'll be very honest
That's where Luz
about.
comes in with her expert grant writing.
Well, because of some of the parameters on the funding, even the expert grant writing won't get us to where we were hoping we would be. So we'll talk about that. So our service line replacements up to date. So when we replace these two, just to be clear, what the contractor out there is doing is they're not doing a full excavation. So they're basically putting pits and then being able to pull this basically the copper material through those pits to either our meter, the main, and also to the home. So that's the other thing that's very unique about this project. We're actually, our contractor works with the property owners and we are entering their homes as part of this process. So way different than a normal project that we would have. Yes.
Yeah.
So next, please.
Can I
Nightmare.
use your bathroom?
It has its challenges.
It does. I worked construction back. If I use your bathroom?
So the funding, internally, City Council has approved $15 million for the lead service line replacement program. So currently that's on the investigations, the replacements that we have done. And then also we have an outside consultant, CDM Smith, who is our program manager. So again, as part of doing this project, they've helped us with how to inventory all of this information. Also, what's really unique is we've set up a call center that's actually handled by the consultant. So we have just a long list of FAQs we provide those folks. They are English and Spanish speakers, but we also have the capability to bring in a translator service if need be. And they are crucial in just the everyday interactions with the public and helping us get some of the documents out there. And as you may remember, we passed an ordinance that allows us to go on property without their permission, but we are still asking for permission 100% of the time. And primarily we're getting that without any problem. And that's the right way to approach it. So, and then, I'm sorry.
Just on the 15 million, because if you pretty much 1% of the homes have the lead, if we're not gonna spend 15 million.
Well, the galvanized requiring replacement has to be also
Okay, but
replaced.
still, that's a lot.
It is, but we have the potholing, which is the investigation cost, then the cost of the actual consultant to help us with the work. So I think all in, we're probably, I mean, this is obviously a guesstimate. Worst case scenario, we could be spending around 35 million.
Oh.
Yes. Good,
Yeah.
better case
I mean, I know
scenario,
There's grants, but.
better
yeah.
case scenario, probably around 25 million.
Really?
So, yes.
I was gonna ask if there was gonna be any money left over, we could use somewhere else, but
That's right.
apparently not.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to bring you that news.
Need it for
but,
fire
no.
stations.
It was going.
So, so anyway, we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So we're guesstimating, I mean, realistically right now, and of course, as we get more data with the potholes we're taking, we're guesstimating between 2,000 and 2,200 replacements. An average cost of a full replacement right now is $10,000. So that's our side and the owner side, and that even includes if the meter pit needs to be replaced and other things associated with that. What it doesn't include is the traffic control, which is added into that, but it's not an extremely large cost, and then other program costs. But there is going to be an ongoing need for our call center and our program management, which one comment I want to make. Obviously, based on some of the requirements from the feds, if you will, through the state. We have a longer time to do the replacements, but our objective is to get through the replacements as quickly as reasonably possible once we get there. So, so next slide, please. So the grants and loans. So basically, there is nationally around $15 billion available. The money is put through the drinking water revolving funds, which is pretty typical. Annual amount varies for Colorado, and I'll get into that really soon. So this starts the part that gets a little frustrating in the way they've handled the money. When they first put out the money, it was, will basically allow you to take it all as grants And there really were very, very few requirements. Well, that's changed as we progress forward. I'd say for a couple reasons. One, big surprise, the federal government grossly underestimated the impacts this would have on local communities. So it's going to cost more than they thought it would cost. So as part of that, in May 2024, one of the criterias for replacing the galvanized requiring replacement is you have to identify that you actually had lead upstream of that. So if you can identify you have lead upstream of that, you are allowed to get the money that for the lead line replacements. But if you can't, you still have to replace it, but you're not allowed to have that funding.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
What reason was that?
Um,
So you're saying you don't have lead
It's irony.
that's coming out?
so it's basically, it was a way that they could make it more difficult for people to get these funds, quite frankly. And the reason we're doing a lot of this is because of poor records on what we had information wise. Now we're still getting through all of that and determining, we're finding a lot of the information that shows we had lead ahead of the galvanized, but there are going to be areas where we're not going to be able to prove that, like most.
Well, they're probably looking like East Coast has, been around since the
Correct.
early,
Correct.
1800s and.
And honestly, there were several areas in the East Coast, they've actually done a lot of this work because they knew it was,
They knew before.
Yeah,
Oh.
they knew before and they knew how big the issue was. So,
It's just the real challenge is the rule itself says we have to call it a galvanized requiring replacement if we don't have records to prove otherwise. And
Yes.
they are saying that it's not downstream of lead. And now they're saying, but about that, you're not going to get any funding unless you actually do have the record. So
Yeah.
well, it was a shift that it has going to have widespread impacts.
well, it's, to use a football analogy, it's like you're running to the end zone and it just keeps moving as you're running.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they keep changing the rules but we're still going to put in for January 5th, we can put in for the next allotment of money for the lead service lines. So let's talk about that a little bit. So we've had multiple meetings with the state along with other agencies that are interested in this. Right now for lead service line replacement program for 2025, there's 43 million available. There is an extra supplemental amount where there is 30 million available also. So I'll start with the supplemental amount. The difficulty with the supplemental amount for us to basically qualify, it's a very much a disadvantaged community. And even though we're working in a disadvantaged area, they look at Aurora as a whole. So out of 100, our points were around 40. So
That's weird.
obviously it depends on how many people apply, but that one is, and that would be a full loan, at whatever the rate is. And it's usually a reasonable rate, but chances are we may have difficulty getting into that funding. So with the other, which we are definitely putting in for funding, that is the lead service line replacement program. So up to 49%, maximum of $10 million is forgivable. So here's the difficulty with this one. So whatever we apply for, once they offer a loan with a forgivable to us, that's your one opportunity. So before you could keep applying and you could say you only got 10 million and they, to keep the math simple, you were able to have 5 million forgivable, you could apply for another 10 million. Now you get one shot at
Right.
forgivable. So if we don't get the full amount we apply for the $10 million and say we get $15 million, we're going to have to think about, is that 7.5 million forgivable enough, or are we gonna step back and try again to see if we can get to that full amount? Does that make sense?
But you only apply once.
Well, you're only allowed to have the forgivable ones. You could apply
Oh.
multiple times and
For
get,
loans,
but it
not
would
for
just be
forgivable
loans.
amount, right?
Correct. Yes.
And the
So-
forgivable amount changes every year too. It used to be 50% where you got granted 50% and
Right.
the other 50 was a loan, but every year they keep changing
Yeah.
the percentage.
And that's the other problem. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out, and it's a gamble to a point, what is the least amount we would accept?
So you
with the
should have gotten the whole
forgivable?
the 50/50 deal way right away.
Yes.
That was before my time.
Yeah.
Right, see?
Well, and it was also before we knew enough to even apply.
Yeah,
Really.
they had already started the process when I came along a year ago. And even then when we submitted, they were like, no. They pushed everything back and we're like, no, all of a sudden we changed this rule. So you guys have to start from scratch. So we started from scratch 2024. Same thing happened. Now they pushed it back again.
I've been doing this type of work for over 33 years and I've never seen this before. This is definitely a new one from my experience. It's very, it's obviously a little bit frustrating for us because they keep moving everything. But we're still going to apply and we're going to do the best job we can to get that
They
funding.
moved the funding goalpost and they're moving the requirements goalpost too. So it's becoming more stringent, whereas it's also becoming harder to get the funds to be able to do the work we have to do. So it is truly
Now,
double-edged.
we
sword.
could get extremely lucky and we don't find the amount we thought we were going to find out there, but I don't want
Yeah.
hope or luck to be a strategy.
Yeah.
So
Large program,
it is,
big scope
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
it is. So
multi-year, yeah.
Do you find any homes that are completely scraped? You know, somebody buys the house and scrapes it to the bottom and then you don't,
So we actually,
because you still have the pipes.
part of what we did was we went through and we looked at that possibility and there are homes that if we cannot prove that if they scraped the home and did not replace the
Oh.
pipes, they're on the list.
Okay.
So there could be a home that was built in the 80s, but we have no documentation that they actually changed the
Yeah.
pipes. So we're gonna unfortunately have to assume it has galvanized or lead. Yes, so.
Not a whole lot of lead has been found, it looks like.
No.
Percentage wise, but when you find it, does it have to be handled or disposed of in any certain way or just throw it in dad's landfill over there?
They pretty much throw it.
Goes to Murphy
in-
Creek.
They pretty much throw it in dad's landfill
Okay.
at this point in time. Yes. So there isn't, it isn't like asbestos and some of the other materials. It's not determined that we have to dispose of it a certain way.
And often the lines are abandoned, so.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yes,
we don't even.
we don't even pull them. They're,
Just leave it there.
they're
Yeah.
abandoned, yeah.
Yeah.
Just leave them in the ground. so to
Yes.
speak. Okay, good. That makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, the least amount of disturbance we have in the property owner's yard is always the best way to do business. Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Any questions? Councilwoman Hancock?
Oh, Hancock, where is she?
No questions here.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So that, is that information only or does that need to go?
Just information only.
Okay, gotcha. Now, I think Councilwoman Bergan has requested number 10, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
Just looking for PowerPoint. There it is. Yay.
I saw this gentleman at a function the other day and I avoided him. We made eye contact and I just kind of went the other way. Rob.
Oh, no, he mentioned me.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, no. He was very nice. He said, I'm sorry, but I have to defend the rights of my residents in Aurora. And he was like,
See,
it's
Councilwoman
okay.
Bergan, if you have any questions.
Right, you're both doing a great job. I'm hitting slideshow and it's not turning. Oh, there
At
you
the
go.
top, all the way at the top, that little box that has an arrow. There you go.
Okay. So I thought, particularly for Councilmember Hancock, who has not been involved in WISE for ages and ages, we would do both an update on WISE and an update on the Dominion contracts, because we will be bringing the WDA, the Water Delivery Agreement for WISE, to you probably in January. It's getting close. So I thought it would be just helpful, particularly for Councilmember Hancock, to get a recap of the Water Infrastructure and Supplies Efficiency Agreement, which is a regional sharing agreement that came out of this idea that I know you know well, about the problems of reliance on non-tributary groundwater, particularly the Denver Basin. And we have these beautiful aquifers that are non-replenishable, that are being pumped like crazy. And at some point, all those wonderful communities are going to run out of water. And this idea was to use the Prairie Water System, which when it was finished, and I'm sure someone can correct me on numbers, was about $600 million. And since then, it's currently, we've put $1 billion into Prairie Waters. It's a significantly expensive project. And we're still not at capacity, right? It's a 50 MGD capacity pipe system. And so it's going to continue to grow and will be an enormous benefit to the city. But WISE helps us recoup some of those costs, which is great. It's 100,000 acre feet of water in 10-year blocks. And this was something that was interesting. It took me a little bit of time to wrap my head around because of the way people talked about it in the past. But Aurora and Denver have agreed to provide up to, we've agreed to provide 100,000 acre feet over a 10-year block. It's not a rolling average. It's, 2030 to 2040, 100,000 acre feet. People talk about it as interruptible, and it is. It's elastic, but at the end of that period, we have to have provided 100,000 acre feet. So if we provide less in 1 year, right? This was something that wasn't, like, the way people talked about it wasn't really clear to me when I first started. If we provide 5,000 acre feet in 1 year, we have to provide that additional 5,000 acre feet in.
What happens at the year 10?
Right, and so the WDA, as you will see when you get it, has these sort of mins and maxes. So South Metro doesn't want Aurora saying, oh, it's a really flush year. Here's 50,000 acre feet and in 1 year, right? And but we want to be able to provide more in 1 year if we can. And probably as the blocks start, our goal will be to front load water so that if there are dry years where we want to scale it back, we can do that without running into that concern about at the end of the block. So I just think that's a really important piece that wasn't communicated as clearly as I thought it needed to be early on. So that's.
I'm sorry, Alex, when was this now that this was all determined and put in place?
So the idea started being created in the 2000s. Our agreement with South Metro and Denver, the water delivery agreement, was 2013 was when that was signed. And we have another agreement with Denver that's a 2012 agreement. And I think Denver and South Metro have a couple agreements around that time period as well. So that's when it seemed to really solidify what the plan was going to be before it was on.
She wouldn't have allowed it.
Probably not. Right? It was a different time. It was a different thinking.
Yeah.
People were looking at this huge system we were building and thinking, oh, we have all this capacity.
Wonderful, yeah.
Today, we'd be like, what capacity? We need everything,
We don't need
right?
to share.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's always interesting how these things evolve, and hindsight gives you a different perspective than you do. Though
Yeah.
it is helpful, as we've talked about in the past and we'll talk about in the future, we have entities on our borders, right, that are where developers are being allowed to drill wells and provide water through non-tributary systems. And one of our fears, as you all well know, is that eventually those systems are going to come to Aurora and say, hey, can we just annex in? Can you just add us? Can you just turn on your pipe? And so to the extent that we're helping tamp, some little portion of that down, it's helpful.
Yeah.
Right. And how do I use this word? And the cost is very helpful. They pay a lot of money and that's helpful. So where we are right now is the full delivery, the beginning of the block has been delayed significantly because of infrastructure. And the cost of that infrastructure has dramatically increased, particularly the DIA pipeline. Aurora has no obligation in that pipeline. That's entirely between South Metro and Denver Water in terms of building that pipeline. So there's two major pieces of infrastructure, the permanent connection, which is a connection out at Binney that allows water to go from Binney into the South Metro system, and then the DIA pipeline. The permanent connection is almost done. Excel is working on powering it, and then Earl's group is working on the SCADA connections and what needs to go there. DIA pipeline is supposed to be done by May 2025. And the amended water delivery agreement is getting there. We've been working on it for years. It kind of fits and starts, but we're finally like, we have to get this done. So we will be bringing that to you hopefully in January, as I said. And the first block will begin presumably in June. We did, because we are ramping into it, Aurora requested something less than the 100,000 acre feet, and South Metro agreed to 95,000 acre feet for that first block. And if there is a problem, continued problem with infrastructure, each year that the infrastructure isn't in place, that block would go down by another 5,000 acre feet per year. So just to give us a little operational flexibility. I thought it would just be helpful to look at some pipeline routes, and just as we talk about Dominion next. So just to remember where Prairie Waters comes in and the Rampart line comes in, and they all meet over at Binney near Aurora Reservoir. The Rampart line being our high quality mountain water, so water that we're much more protective over. And the Prairie Waters line being, of course, the South Platte return flow water, which has a higher TDS. One of the interesting pieces of the agreement that you will see is that the TDS, right now we have an obligation to provide a TDS that's equivalent to what we are providing our own citizens, generally 500 megaliter, about I forget what the increment is. What's the metric? 500
Milligrams per liter.
milligrams per liter, thank you, of TDS per, and that obligation goes away in 2030. We get to continue to blend if we want to. So we can always, so Aurora and Denver will always be able to determine, do we want, maybe we have really flush reservoirs, it's better to give them mountain water. Maybe we don't have anything in our reservoirs, we want to give them all South Platte water. We will have that control after 2030 to determine what we're giving them. And this is just South Metro system. Of course, it's all south of Aurora. And that western pipeline is one that has become relevant in Sterling Ranch. Their infrastructure. So Sterling Ranch is over to the far left, the little peach block, and you can see Rampart goes through Sterling Ranch, as does the Denver's line. And the blue Cherokee Ranch line, the blue one on the lower part of the screen here, that's the infrastructure that they needed to complete in order to get out of Rampart, which, as you recall, they have been waiting to complete.
Dragging their feet.
Right. They have apparently one 20-foot stick of pipe that they can't get in the ground. Yes.
They galvanized?
I don't know if it's galvanized.
They are a problem.
Just a quick reminder of the agreement. So the 2030 water is water that, it's kind of interesting. Someone was smart. Is water that we were obligated to provide. Aurora was obligated to provide down at FRICO because of a change case. And, decade ago, someone bought that obligation and they moved it upstream. So it's their water, but as is the 2050 water. They traded us water supply. So the 250 acre feet is their water. But what Marshall realized, particularly in this last round of requests from Dominion, is that they weren't paying to use our infrastructure. And if they had to pick up their water when it was physically and legally available in the river, they have no storage. They wouldn't be able to use it appropriately. So the value of our infrastructure is a huge value to them. And then the 570 acre feet is essentially Wise water delivered early. We agreed that we would give them up to 570 acre feet through Rampart, which was part of, they own like 1,300 acre feet-ish, maybe 1,376 acre feet of Wise water that they have to wheel around their system. That, instead of taking it Roxborough, they have to take it all the way up and all the way around through Castle Rock. They don't like that because it has a lot of system losses, and there's a couple water taxes that Castle Rock and Parker have put on the use of that infrastructure.
Those Dominion agreements, I think if you put that into AI or Chat GPT, it would overheat and blow a gasket. It's kind of hard to understand.
Right.
It takes some special, I don't know, it confuses me, I'll tell you that.
It is, and there's a piece that I'd be happy to share with you after the meeting, just because it'd be more appropriate after the meeting. But on that, if you remind me, which is kind of interesting, because they are complicated, and Dominion has a bunch of different agreements going on, right, with all sorts of different people. So Marshall realized that a big piece of what was missing in these agreements is that cost recovery, and that was great. So now we are looking at, we want cost recovery. We want you to pay us for what you're getting out of our system, which is storage and conveyance, and it's a significant value to them. And we also want Dominion mostly out of Rampart, and we want these agreements to be final. We don't want to talk to them again in 2 years and renegotiate agreement. We want this to be their last ask. And I think we're very close, which is really nice. They've currently requested, to extend the Rampart delivery for the 2030 water through 2031. If they can get the 250 water and the 570 water through the Wise infrastructure, Marshall is okay with extending that smaller increment through 2031. They want to continue to use Rampart for the 570 when Wise is complete through 2028, and we were not interested in doing that. What we are willing to consider is that extended delivery for the 230 acre feet through 2031, and an emergency connection through Wise infrastructure, but not through Rampart infrastructure. They wanted some way to stay in there permanently under an emergency, and we said we're not interested in that. Increasing the rates for the delivery for the 570 acre feet. They had asked that we participate in the system losses. And we said, no, we're not willing to do that. We are, as a concession, willing to look at system losses for the 230 acre feet. And we're considering that. It's, I think, about an additional 18 to 25 acre feet annually for a period of time. And that's what we're talking about.
Why would we participate in system losses for the 230?
It's a very good question. And I think it's because
Just be nice. Okay, got
it. In order to get the end deal done and to, sort of make it all work, we're willing to consider that. So that, it's currently on the table. 570 is out of Rampart by end of year 2024. And the 250 acre feet is out of Rampart by 2024. And since Rampart is such critical infrastructure for us and it's often at capacity, that's really a great value to us to get them out of Rampart. And that's it. Oh, look, stop sharing. Black.
And the Rampart system is needing a lot of infrastructure upgrades.
Yes, expansion so that we can pull more water in. Yes.
And that's a big project, which James knows all about.
So.
So hopefully I'll be bringing you a couple of agreements with Dominion in the next, maybe by next month. I'm not sure. I know they would like to get them done as soon as possible. I have a red line. They sent over a term sheet that Marshall and I redlined right before he left. I'm gonna kind of clean that up and send it back to them this week. And then we'll see if we get to an agreement that we would bring back to you probably the next Water Policy Committee.
Thanks. More questions or?
No, okay.
Great. Yes. Yes.
I've got some answers to Council
Oh.
Bergan's questions on snow-tail sites.
Oh.
So,
Oh,
there's 166 snow-tail sites in the state,
okay.
and we utilize 16 of those within our basins.
Oh, only 16.
16.
Oh, which is why we need the airplane.
Yes.
Speaking of wise, I just forgot the name of this unincorporated Arapahoe County neighborhood at, I believe it's Mississippian Gun Club. Sarah was working with them on a possible water supply because their aquifers are going down.
Red Hill Estates?
No,
Is it
Thunderbird.
Thunderbird.
Oh,
It's Thunderbird. Thank you.
Thunderbird.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Any update on what our partnership with them might be or could be, or their plan, or? Because
I
they're
haven't
hurting.
heard anything recently. I don't know if we're.
Yeah, so the last time we spoke, and it's been a few months actually now, we asked them to provide, some high level, what infrastructure it would take to serve them. And I think they probably found the cost to do that is not very palatable. Because when,
So we would do it through WISE?
well, it wasn't through WISE, they were talking about potable service though,
Okay, yeah.
from what I understand, and it wouldn't have been
Oh,
like a WISE connection, obviously, because that wouldn't.
right.
They were looking for service to replace their groundwater source and other well sources that they were using for service to the residents. And they had enlisted a local consultant to provide what infrastructure needs would be required to serve.
Mhm.
And we were like, you don't quite have the existing conditions correct. You need to extend, certain lines and this and that. And we've gone down that path a number of times with Dove Hill and Thunderbird. That's why Dove Hill, every couple of years, they always come in and say, hey, we'd like service, Fox Hill. We have a number of those that have done that over the years. And they just come in and it's just too expensive because, we don't want to take on that responsibility to provide the infrastructure. And they're usually large lot, estate lots. And so the cost per home, per lot is usually, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And it's tough to get everybody to agree to that. It's usually a few interested residents, but to get them en masse to agree to that kind of investment is usually the pitfall for those.
They wouldn't just go out and get a loan for their.
Right, that's one, maybe that's an opportunity for them to do some kind of, metro district of
district.
some kind, to fund that kind of debt. And you need them all to, those usually a super majority to get that done. And so I think that's where they usually fail. I haven't heard from them in a few months though. Yeah.
They were having to drill down further at great expense to go deeper into the aquifer in there. So either option is very expensive.
Yeah, and I think they're looking at that cost benefit on either side of whether they want to improve the system they have now or try to extend the infrastructure from us. But we were from a burden to us as the utility to provide service. There wasn't that many lots that, we probably couldn't work with them. But I think putting in the infrastructure was something we didn't want to
I
consider.
think also, and Kat could speak more closely to this, but for those extraterritorial agreements, those places we serve that are outside of our service area, they also do pay higher rates. So
That's true.
Right.
substantially higher rates. So that might be the other part too. Once they're,
Times at least, right?
yeah, it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, and those large lot of state lots, like the ones that we've seen in other, outside of our service boundary, they get to be $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for a connection because of the large lot
Yeah.
and the storm drainage development fees and in some cases. But yeah, they do get, that's a good point. They do
Yeah.
get pretty expensive just for my
And
connection.
then would we make them adhere to our
Turf ordinance,
turf ordinance.
yes.
With
Well,
their
most of it's
bigger
horse
lots.
property over there.
Yeah, they typically don't have a lot of turf, that's right.
Right, it's
Oh.
mostly horse property.
Right.
They had one guy hauling tanks of water out of there with his business on a truck. He wasn't earning a lot of favor with the neighbors.
I know somebody who's taking water out of the faucet for putting it in a big old tank.
Oh, my goodness.
Hey,
Any
this is
miscellaneous, go
A
ahead.
helpful preview, because what we're hoping to bring to you next month is the beginning of a conversation around the future. Because of extraterritorial requests, what does additional annexation look like? Why we might not want to have any more annexations? And what, because we're looking at with our IWMP2 and requests that have come in, and with global warming and the decreased water supply that we're expecting, the pressure. So we wanted to kind of bring that to you to start a conversation around policies for extraterritorial service and any thoughts about annexations and whether or not that's in the best interest of the city. So
Yeah, I think we've been pumping the brakes on that anyhow, haven't we? Annexation.
Well, we just.
The last one was.
A massive one, so.
Right, right off more than we can chew.
right.
Yeah. And it's always kind of like, oh, well, they can pay, but it's like, yeah, but what's the other side is how much water is
Yeah, what's the burden?
the burden, yeah.
And providing services too.
And can they pay, and do they actually end up paying?
Right.
Right? It's an interesting question, because if you say, oh, I think the last annexation was, the water department said it's going to be about $200 million for the water supply. But if you have that, developers in other municipalities require developers to bring the water in order to develop. But they can carve off a little tiny slice, like you have seen our acquisition numbers, and we'll buy 50 acre feet or 100 acre feet. They can buy a half acre foot at a much higher price because they're only doing it once. And then they drive that price up for everyone else because they're buying in smaller increments. But we can talk about all that.
Yeah, it's important to consider
Yeah,
in the future, right?
yeah.
Be realistic. How are we doing on the Powhatan closure?
Yeah, did you want to have everybody involved in the conversation or?
Oh, just an update.
Just a-
Are we gonna meet the deadline of the end of this month?
So, we're gonna pivot a little.
Extended deadline.
Yeah, we're gonna pivot a little bit because we're still getting some failures on the main line. So we've been meeting as a group and we've decided that we're gonna pivot a little bit in terms of, we're gonna get that road reopened sooner than later. And so we are going to start paving operations next week. But we're still chasing down why we're getting these failures. So the point being that we want to get it with the weather kind of getting cooler. We want to get this thing paved back, and we're going to focus on trying to figure out some mechanical jetting and some other methodologies associated with getting these to pass. But we'll probably have to go back sometime next year in order to reconnect these laterals into the existing system. So what we don't want to do is keep chasing our tail out there while this lane is closed, while this road is closed. And so until we can really diagnose why and put some effort into getting these passing results, we're going to pay this thing back and we're going to come out sometime next year with a greater, more robust communication effort. And just a different plan of attack. And that would include neighborhood meetings and some public outreach, and this is what we're doing and this is where we're at.
I mean, we could literally go door to door on some of those roads where the traffic has increased so badly with the detours.
Yeah, and so obviously there's been some lessons learned in this, and there's things that we know that we're going to have to do. And that community, by the time we go and go back to those roads, they will not have forgotten what happened in this go round. It's gonna be very fresh on their mind still. So we know from history, when we close a road, we reopen it and then we go back, actually the community can be more unhappy because we do that. So one of the things that we know we're gonna need to do, and Vern has talked to folks there. Elizabeth Levere, who works on my team, has been talking to folks out there, and I've been talking to folks out there. So one of the things that we're going to need to do is do public meetings, because first and foremost, people need to be able to be heard. The other thing too is that one of the real struggles out there that we experienced is while we did have signage, and we actually did take efforts to keep the bigger trucks off of those roads, they were still coming onto the roads. So part of what we need to regroup on is how are we going to take more assertive efforts in getting maybe off-duty police out there, or whatever it's going to take to ensure that we don't have construction traffic and large trucks going down those roads, and also that folks are following speed limit signs. Because what we know is of greatest concern is people care about what's going to happen to their kids and their families and their dogs with that traffic coming through their neighborhood. So we want to make sure that we are going to start early in developing a traffic plan, working alongside Public Works that's going to be functional. And Earl had said that we'll do what it takes to ensure that it's not going to be the same level of concern and inconvenience for the citizens that we've currently experienced. So we are planning to send out what my understanding is, and I've been working very closely with Elizabeth, she's been doing this for a very long time, but that the best way to get information right now, not in 6 months from now, but right now, is through the HOAs. And they have a very robust Facebook group as well. I know for a fact that some of what you have written has made it onto their HOA Facebook pages. So we want to be able to get information out to people in the way that they consume it.
Right.
And part of that is going to be through social media and also through their newsletters they get through their HOA. So we want to let people know that the roads are going to reopen. And I talked to Elizabeth this morning, and we feel it's very important that we let people know that we will be coming back. I don't want that to be a surprise that when they get information in a few months from now that like, oh wait, now this isn't over with. So I would just assume that people actually talk to me about it now, because those are going to be considerations that we'll be able to develop into how we're going to manage traffic and also communicating with folks going forward. People get most unhappy when they feel like they're not heard.
Right.
And that is one of those things that I don't want to double down and be like, hey, we're reopening the roads, but then, surprise, actually, we're going to come back and do some more stuff. And like I said, from experience, we know that makes people even more unhappy.
Right.
So that supply that remains contaminated, that line,
I'm so glad you brought that word up. Okay, so I did actually talk to a resident that had concerns that the water is contaminated. And so part of what we're going to put in this communication that goes out is an explanation of how it is that we bring these new lines into service. And a big part of that is that they have to go through all of this testing to ensure that there is not contamination that's going to make it into the potable supplies that are going into communities. So really making it clear that those lines that are out there right now are isolated, and that water is not going into a subdivision. Because I talked to a mom who said, I have heard the water's contaminated. And I said, thank you so much for sharing that information with me, because I didn't know that was the perception. And so we're going to make sure that this next communication that goes out shares with folks, not only are these lines not currently connected to water that's going to be coming into any neighborhood, they're isolated lines. The only time water goes into them is literally in, so that we can test and fill and flush. Water isn't coming back out of them into service. So we're going to let folks know that. And the other thing is that we have current monitoring data from the area to ensure people, so that we have current water quality data, because the request was, can you come out and check our water? And I'm like, let me check to see what we've done. I got that information back from our lab. We have done recent testing. We're out there monthly. So I'm going to share the actual map of where we do that water quality testing so that folks can be assured. When I heard that this resident was going out because she was so uncertain buying bottled water, my heart literally dropped to the floor, because if we lose people's trust in their water quality, we've lost everything. And that's true. I mean, the traffic is bad, but loss in water and trust in the water quality is something that's at a different level. So we're going to be addressing that immediately.
sounds like some long-term lessons are learned here with holding contractors accountable and how they handle these pipes, or leave them laying out, and the inspection process. And yeah, so I mean, you're talking about wise and laying a lot of infrastructure. I mean, what if something like this happened at a much grander scale? Right? So I don't know.
Yeah, and that's why they'll still see activity out there because there'll be cleaning operations going on. And it's not necessarily like Shani said, it's not the water's contaminated. There's gonna be some cleaning of the pipe that
So
will
we're,
continue.
so we're paving it without really fixing it. They have to fix it later.
Well, we're paving it without making those connections to the neighborhood.
Okay.
And that's what we're just not doing right now. So that's when we come back and we know that everything's passed, that's when we'll come back and connect it to the neighborhood. But right now, we're just, we don't want to, there's more cleaning that is required.
Be doing it twice.
So that's why we just don't want to continue while we're going through the cleaning operation, is to keep this road closed any longer.
One of the things that, from my understanding, and I want Earl to correct me if I'm wrong, and also Vern, is as we're coming into fall and the weather is changing, then we're really narrowing in on that time when we're gonna be able to get the paving done. So one of the things that we don't want to have happen is, as we are still investing, in our perfect world, actually, we would continue to do work and if we weren't inconveniencing the community that's there, we would probably just continue to figure it out. But knowing that we're coming in on that very narrow time for getting the roads reopened, the decision was made, and I want you to speak to that this would be the best path forward until we're very certain about how we're going to be correcting this issue.
Yeah, you start hitting anything below 45, 40 degrees and actually laying the asphalt in the thinner layers on more residential areas is much, much more difficult. And if we had a sudden drop in temperature, some of the plants may just decide to shut down for the winter. And because they always need to do major maintenance activities during the winter for that. And then we probably wouldn't see them open again till April or May.
Yeah.
So.
Kind of like, yeah.
Gotcha.
And then on the water quality, I just want to, so there are 4 permanent sites out there that we monitor on a regular basis. So, and they've been monitored for several years now. One of them is near the fire station that we have that's in the Harmony neighborhood. And there's, but through the 3 neighborhoods, there's 4 permanent sites that we constantly monitor, and we've had no issues at those sites. So.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for that update. I'll recircle back and see how things are going around the pavement time and what's next. Next meeting,
20th of November.
20th of November. Right, coming up on the holidays.
Yeah, right before Thanksgiving. Oh my
And we'll
goodness.
have an in-person option, just like we have been doing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Be productive and have a wonderful day.